An advocacy group that has spent more than 2 decades fighting for free expression on college campuses is broadening its efforts to fight cancel culture and other perceived threats to free speech across American society. The Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or FIRE for short, is launching a drive to promote greater acceptance of a diversity of views in the workplace, pop culture and elsewhere. The organisation's executive director is Robert Shibley, and he joins me now. Thank you for joining me today, Robert.
Thank you very much for having me.
Could you tell me a bit about FIRE, how it came about and why you feel this movement is so important?
Sure. Well, FIRE was founded in 1999 in an effort by a conservative and a liberal who worked together, both of whom had a lot of interest in academia, one a professor and one a civil liberties lawyer. And they saw back in the 1990s that what we then called political correctness and what we sort of now call wokeness was starting to warp the ability of people to share their ideas and to speak freely on college campuses. And so FIRE has spent the last 20 plus years fighting for free speech on campuses in the United States. And while we've had a lot of wins over the years, I think that the number of actual policies that universities have that allow them to censor has decreased. That actually doesn't mean the censorship has decreased. Unfortunately, what it means is that what has happened is that our culture, and I think this is true across the English-speaking world, has started to become one where people are more afraid to speak out because they see what's happening to people, like you said, in the workplace, on Twitter and Facebook and social media, even sometimes in their own neighborhoods, and they don't feel free to speak out anymore. And that's very dangerous to a liberal democracy because we need people to participate or else they have no reason to believe they have a stake in the society. And so FIRE is going to work as hard as we can to start changing that culture.
And a lot of people have dismissed these kind of concerns as, you know, it's just a few students on university campuses getting a bit overexcited. But you're expanding now because I presume you think that this isn't just singularly a problem with the university campus. This is now a broader cultural trend.
No, I wish it were. And one of the signs that indicated to us a few years ago that the problem was broader than college campuses was the fact that when I started at FIRE almost 19 years ago, and probably for the first 10 years I worked with FIRE, you could rely on students on American campuses to, by and large, be very pro-free speech. They did not want to be told what to say. They were not authoritarian in that sense. And that started to change. They're actually coming in now, whether it's through our, kindergarten through 12th grade, that's high school education. They're already coming in primed to, when they hear something they don't like, go to the authorities, whether that be the social media authorities who are kind of faceless, whether it be the principal, and then when they get to school, whether it be those who are in charge of the diversity, equity, inclusion apparatus, or just a dean of students or college president, and demand that the people who are saying things they don't like be shut down. So, that really indicates that it's much wider. And of course, we're all familiar with the sort of cancel culture incidents that we see happening all the time now in the larger society.
For many years, people turned to the ACLU when it came to these issues of free speech, the American Civil Liberties Union, because, of course, they famously defended the Nazis' right to march through Skokie. And I read that book, Defending My Enemy, by Nair, I believe his name was, who was sort of saying, I defended these people to march because I disagree with them, because I disapprove of neo-Nazism. That was the point. This is a point that is now no longer understood, and it feels very much like the ACLU has reneged on its mission. Is that right?
Well, a lot of people do feel that way, and while FIRE's worked really closely with various chapters of the ACLU, it has state chapters, and actually some states have multiple chapters over the years. The fact is that the ACLU, like many of the groups that operate in the free speech area, the ACLU has 19 issue areas. Free speech is only one of them. They have 18 others. And to the extent, most of the people who work there in the national ACLU aren't there to do free speech work. Their other work, you may agree or disagree with it, but it's certainly not their priority. It can't be their top priority because they have so many. So that's something that FIRE is going to work really hard to make sure. When we did this expansion, we said we are only going to do freedom of expression in off-campus things. There will be nothing else that we do because we don't want to have those conflicts. They're very hard to work through.
Do you commonly face this objection? Because I often find that when you defend free speech, even for people as objectionable as neo-Nazis, people often say, well, you must support what they say then. Whereas, of course, for all the free speech advocates I've ever spoken to, the opposite is the case.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of our founders, Harvey Silverglate, the one who's a civil liberties lawyer, one of his first cases working for the ACLU of Massachusetts was representing a bunch of neo-Nazis who got off a bus and were immediately arrested for getting off the bus in downtown Boston. He's Jewish. That's the sort of work that civil liberties advocates have always done. And it is something, it tends to happen, I think, for the most part. If people are in good faith thinking that, they are willing to accept it when you explain to them why you're doing it. Unfortunately, a lot of those accusations, especially now, are not really good faith accusations. But it's true, and this is something that FIRE, having represented a lot of people on the left and a lot of people on the right over the years, if both sides aren't angry at you, sometimes you are probably not doing the work correctly.
Concerned that free speech has become associated with the right specifically. I mean, you mentioned that you're a non-partisan organisation, and yet again and again people dismiss the free speech question as being a right-wing talking point. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, again, that's something that there's so much team choosing that happens in politics now. And I know this is true everywhere, and it's just the nature of partisanship and human nature. But if you were to ask the same sort of mass of people who might be susceptible to that kind of thing, if they thought free speech was just a trick by the left back in the 1950s and 60s to make sure that, communists could be in the government, or that socialists could teach college classes, they would have thought the same thing. They would have thought that it was a left-wing trick. I mean, free speech always favors those who are not in the pinnacles of power of whatever institution that you're in. And in the United States, it tends to be, at least the very powerful cultural institutions tend to be fairly dominated by the left. And so, as long as that stays true, I think you're going to see a lot of people saying, oh, if you're for, resistance to these organizations, that must be a right-leaning thing. And, 20 years from now, if it's the opposite, we'll be doing the same work and everybody accuse us of being Bernie Sanders. There's really not much you can do about that. Robert Shibley, thank you very much for joining me today.